Well, Donald Trump is back to freaking out about the mainstream media, and now he's demanding the killing of the Press Act. In case you don't know what that is, I'll give you a quick primer. Basically, it is a bill that has already been passed by the House, which is interesting because the House is Republican controlled, and it's now pending the Senate's passing, which is controlled 51 to 49 by Democrats. Donald Trump wants this bill to be killed. The Press Act is known as the Protect Reporters from Exploitive State Spying Act. Yeah, so basically, when a journalist conducts an investigation or a whistleblower leaks them information or somebody working at a company leaks something to a journalist, journalists are often provided what's known as a journalistic protection. Those are enshrined in law in about 49 different states, and they protect journalists from a whole host of their sources being revealed, even in court cases. And the idea is that journalists are supposed to be able to use that protection to let people trust the journalist, that the journalist will keep that person's identity secret. So let's say you were working for Bernie Madoff and you're like, man, I wish I could get this out that Bernie Madoff is a Ponzi and this is all a scam. What do I do? Well, you could call the New York Times basically and go, yo, this guy's a Ponzi. Here's some evidence. Please don't tell anyone about this because Bernie's going to have me killed. Well, Donald Trump does not like that protection. Donald Trump wants to make sure that protection is removed because he does not like that journalists can leak information and then have their sources protected because he calls the mainstream media fake news, a disinformation propaganda agency, and frankly, one that's potentially, at least in his opinion, more aligned with the left and the right. But it's also not just his opinion. Consider this. 70% of Americans, if you go back 50 years, 70% of Americans per Gallup polls and a survey they did right before the election used to trust the media great or fair deal. Well, I guess that survey goes back 50 years. That goes back 50 years. 70% used to trust the media a, quote, great or fair deal. That is now down to just 31% of Republicans actually trust the mainstream media a great or fair deal. Oh, I'm sorry. I misread that. For all Americans, that is just down to 31%. So in other words, you've more than halved the level of trust in the mainstream media. But what I actually wrote here is amongst Republicans, you're down to 12% trust at a fair or great deal. So even fair, do you trust the mainstream media a fair deal? 88% of Republicans say no. And only about half of Democrats, 54%, say yes. So huge political divide here. And a lot of people think the mainstream media, in part because of what we've seen with Donald Trump's attack on the mainstream media since 2016. In many cases, rightfully so, the media has come after him like crazy because honestly, anything having to do with Trump gets a whole lot of clicks and attention, whether it's true or not. And so Donald Trump is now freaking out over this particular bill because he actually wants to go after the people that, in his mind, did him wrong. Listen to this Truth Social post. I don't know about you, but I'm not going to forgive over 8 years of Russia hoaxes, spying by ex-presidents, 2 fake impeachments, a lab-created pandemic, forced lockdowns, forced vaccines, lawfare, election fraud, political prisoners, Ashley Babbitt, a weaponized 2-tier justice system, open borders, a war on oil, continuously funding proxy wars, and censorship. Not in a million years. Your judgment day is coming. This is a pretty big threat. And obviously not all of that has to do with media independence, but Donald Trump has made it clear by also posting on Truth, quote, Republicans must kill this bill. And so let's analyze for a moment sort of the pros and cons of this bill. A few things to note before that. There are now memes circulating that Elon Musk might end up buying MSNBC. I never put anything past these things from actually happening anymore because it seems like the most ironic things just keep happening over and over again. But anyway, Elon Musk potentially buying MSNBC and then kicking out some of the hosts that they don't like and replacing them potentially with Joe Rogan. maybe giving Joe Rogan a primetime slot on MSNBC. Honestly, it'd be kind of cool. Donald Trump has also, some additional background here, has also talked about weaponizing the Federal Communications Commission and potentially revoking media licenses from companies like CBS, NBC, ABC, and even Fox, per the Financial Times. So there's a lot here. So let's look at sort of pros and cons of this Press Act for a moment. First of all, 49 states already have laws protecting or shielding journalists for things like this. The problem is they don't apply uniformly across all the states, and they don't protect you from federal subpoenas from like the Department of Justice or the FBI, which some believe would be bad because it would give the federal government the power to basically spy on journalists or subpoena records, or potentially, I mean, practically speaking, Donald Trump being like, yo, find out who leaked this, and then sort of getting to the bottom of it, using the courts as sort of his tool, if you will. That would be possible if you kill the Press Act, or if it doesn't pass for whatever reason. I suspect it will pass. You would need it to happen during the lame duck session here. So Democrats need to pass it. They have the votes to do it, and then Biden would need to sign it. Republicans already gave up their opportunity to say no on it. That's because the House already passed it. Now, we'll see. It's possible that if the Senate makes any changes to it, it could get pushed back to the House for approval, for amendment approvals, and then they could just sit on it and sandbag it, because as soon as Trump tells the House or the Senate to do a certain thing, they kind of seem to do it because they also want to get reelected, and they realize the power of supporting Trump and how bad of an idea it is not to support Trump. Anyway, consider for a moment, like out of, I think it was the 10 reps who voted to impeach Donald Trump, I think 8 or 9 of them, at least 8 of them, have lost their job since then. So there's a huge power in having Trump on your side if you're a Republican. Anyway, so the issue again is that the Press Act would basically extend these state laws to all states. But then it would also give you protection against federal subpoenas, DOJ subpoenas, FBI subpoenas. It's basically considered a shield against government overreach or the government from spying on a journalist. But there are some critics to this, and this is where some of Donald Trump's POVs come from as well. Now, I want to touch on that, but I quickly want to apologize. Yesterday on the RoboHack website, we still have this problem at the moment. We had a little oopsie doopsie where basically DocuSign locked our account because too many people signed up or were trying to sign up for RoboHack, and it broke our account. So we're working on fixing that. If you want, you could email us at invest@robohack.ai, and we will gladly send you the corrected link. Just if you can, let us know if you're looking for a link for a single signer, dual signer, or entity signer. But I just personally wanted to apologize for that. I hope to have these links fixed today. You can see those on screen here. You can even toggle dark mode, which I think is kind of cool. But anyway, what is RoboHack? You can see it here. It's the venture capital. These buttons are broken right now. Sorry about that. We're getting them fixed with DocuSign. It's just DocuSign's customer service isn't that great. I apologize for that. Anyway, I wanted to acknowledge this. So yes, email us. The email's right there, invest@robohack.ai. Ask, hey, I need the correct link for entity, individual, or couple, and we'll get that over to you. So anyway, thank you for your faith, but also sorry. So now let's keep going back to what Donald Trump's talking about. So why is Donald Trump freaking out about wanting this dead? Well, mostly because a lot of people think he's going to use this as an opportunity to go after his journalists or the journalist enemies that he has, and people who say bad things about the Trump organization or otherwise. However, if you to go to more of a sort of centrist approach on this as to why it could be bad to have these protections, the protections would potentially allow journalists who have an agenda to conceal the identity of people who are lying or defaming companies or providing false information, misinformation, or disinformation. See, theoretically, if somebody works for, let's say, the Trump organization, and then they fabricate on a letterhead, an invoice that's like, Donald Trump's hookers, 69 hookers for Donald Trump. And it's on the Trump letterhead. The person works for Trump or whatever. And then they send that to the New York Times. The New York Times is like, oh, well, that person actually works there. and we're talking to them face to face. Okay, this seems credible. This seems legitimate. They're a bookkeeper for Trump or whatever. Oh man. And then when they write the story, it turns into, you know, documents reviewed by the New York Times, provided by someone within the organization who spoke to us on a condition of anonymity for fear of retribution against Donald Trump, provided these statements, which we verified as credible, given that the person works there, something like that, right? So then they write the whole story about it. Now, obviously, you would hope there's some more due diligence than that, because again, it could just all be fabricated. What if the person has a vendetta against Trump? But then again, if a paper has a vendetta against Trump, they might run with it anyway because they have a personal vendetta. So now the person with the disinfo is shielded and the paper is shielded from liability. So you potentially have this collusion between a disinfo insider and a media outlet who both have an agenda of being anti a particular candidate, and then they could shape narratives the way they want, and then they're legally protected from defamation lawsuits in such a case. Now, that's an example of the abuse, which definitely calls into question the integrity of our media system. Now, on the flip side, you would hope that an honest media, I know I'm saying those words, an honest media would not do that and wouldn't air stories like that or wouldn't have bias, you would hope. And then if, let's say, Trump sued them for disinfo, that they would still be able to operate because they're not getting sued for $1 billion, because they're just trying to do their best and provide, information and perspective for people to review. And then, thanks to journalistic protections, they would then be able to limit their time in court and spend more time in journalism. The problem is, really, over the last 10 years, and I experienced this myself as well, every single media outlet has massive biases. Some substantially less, some substantially more. Like, for example, I consider The Economist pretty freaking left-leaning, but I also consider their facts to be very high. Then I look at something like the Associated Press, and I consider them mostly neutral and also highly factual, although I know that there could be oopsie-doopsies. And then I look at like the LA Times, especially their editorial board, and I think of what they did to me during the campaign, and I think of them as the biggest lying scumbags ever. The same could be said about the New York Times that wrote about me, or certain Sacramento papers, the Ventura County Star. A lot of these were very aligned with Gavin Newsom, and I'm like, wow, you don't want to air critical commentary of your governor because you're worried about getting kicked out of the governor's circle, which is also an interesting bias, because then it goes in the opposite direction, right? Somebody who wants to compete against an existing power like Gavin Newsom can't, because if somebody fairly covers a competitor, then what happens is that governor goes, "You're not invited to my press conference anymore, VC star." Whereas, "Oh, you bagged on my competitor? Here, you come front row." That's the kind of rigging that goes on all of the time. And I've also seen straight up lying from companies like CNN, where they're like, there are no competitors against Gavin Newsom. And I'm like, bro, I was, up in the polls, got like 1 million votes, won San Francisco. What is this? So there's also blatant lying that happens in media. So, my faith in media has collapsed, though I think it's, I still try my best to review, to find fact, and then corroborate as much as I can. But I tell you, it's gotten harder, and frankly, it's gotten exhausting. So anyway, this gives you a little bit of an idea of what's going on with Donald Trump. Again, apologies on the robohack.ai website. We're going to hopefully get that fixed within, today. I am out on vacation with the family, so good luck with markets. I'm kidding, but it's beautiful right now. We're in a snowy biome, and follow me on Instagram. I'll share some videos. That'll be at Real Meat Kevin on at Meet Kevin on Instagram, or at Real Meat Kevin on X. Thank you so much for being here, folks. We'll see you in the next one. Goodbye. Good luck.